Hi, John. Welcome back. Thanks for coming back to the show.
Jason, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, John, I think we talked about this Idaho man that we got into some trouble in Atlanta. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, an individual in Idaho is accused of purchasing on the dark web credentials for computer servers and users, and then using those stolen credentials to steal personally identifiable information in the form of medical records and police reports. That's between June of 2017 and April of 2018. After that, he is also accused later in 2018 of hacking into the computers of an orthodontist in Florida, stealing further medical records, and then trying to extort money from the orthodontist in exchange for not releasing the records of those from the stolen records. And he even gave or allegedly gave the orthodontist the identities and social security numbers of the orthodontist kids as evidence of the records that he had and what he was willing to do with it.
So, John, how often does this happen in that world?
So when I read the story about this, what struck me as the most unusual part about it is that the guy got caught. Very infrequently does the guy actually get
Oh
caught.
man.
It's very common for there to be a breach like this. The dark web is when I do a security risk assessment for a client, I always make sure that we search the dark web. The dark web is where if you have stolen passwords, credentials, social security numbers, etc., that's where it goes to be sold. That's where money can be made off of that.
I see.
And usually it's hard to find people that are buying things from the dark web. They're much better at tracking or covering their tracks. And so those credentials might be bought and sold in a dark corner of the internet, but it's very rare that you actually find the person that has bought them. And
Right.
if there is an extortion attempt that's being made, it's frequently done in the form of ransomware, which
Hmm.
is very hard to trace. And it's frequently being done by international actors where the FBI doesn't have any jurisdiction. The police don't have any jurisdiction. So, reading this, the general situation, information is stolen, information is used to try to extort money from a victim. That was pretty color by numbers cyber attack. The fact that he got caught is what's unusual.
Right. I mean, I guess it was a good thing that he was in Idaho. So there's two major questions that I have, right? So we obviously have the prevention that you talked about, but let's talk about the actual what should a person do other than hiring you and your team? What should a person do immediately when they find out about this breach? So imagine you are the orthodontist gives you a call. What are the steps that you go through to start dealing with the problem?
So generally, the first two calls that you should make are to your information security attorney and to your cyber liability or cyber crime insurance provider. Between those two parties, those are the first two steps. They'll get the ball rolling. The information security attorney, they should be able to quarterback the team, right? They'll work with insurance. They'll work with your IT group, assuming you're a business that has that. They'll work with a forensics investigation. They'll work with law enforcement. They'll also help you work with your clients. One of the big things that we run into when there's a breach like this is how do we tell our clients? In the instance here, these are largely medical practices where the clients are patients themselves. It's not always the case. Sometimes it's a B2B provider where the clients are other businesses and they have individuals who they're responsible for. And my clients end up being very worried about what is this breach going to do to our clients and our client relationship? And
Right.
so a properly trained, experienced information security attorney will be able to quarterback that team and will help you reach out to your clients and inform them in a way that is not unreasonably scary. Sometimes you need to notify clients, but the threat isn't imminent or that there really isn't anything dangerous that's happened to those clients, but you do feel a need to tell them to be a responsible partner to them. But also lay out what their options are and explain to them, look, here's what's happened, here's what the implications are to you, and here's how we're going to help you fix that. And that's also where the relationship with the insurance provider comes in. If you are properly insured for cyber liability insurance, cyber crime insurance, you should have options available to help fund notices to affected individuals, to man call centers, and even to provide identity monitoring services if it's severe enough.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they had two issues here, not only as a financial information, but where it comes to people's medical records, that's another HIPAA violation that they could face.
Yes, absolutely. And so the victims here, the businesses that were victimized here, not the individuals, but they all have notification obligations, or I would think they do, to the individuals whose information was compromised. That's both under HIPAA, given the nature of the protected health information that was stolen, but also given that there were names and social security numbers of tens of thousands of people in almost every state. That is going to trigger a breach notification alert under state statute. And so you have an obligation, even if these weren't medical practices and it wasn't protected health information under HIPAA, names and social security numbers or names and other types of information that's similarly sensitive, that's going to trigger a notification obligation both to individuals themselves and frequently to the attorney general, depending on the jurisdiction.
So, I mean, the other question that I have is where there's a breach in this situation and the person was caught, what happens to that information? Like, where is it at this point? Is it somewhere on the dark web? Where is the information? Can they get it back?
So it depends on what the bad actor did with it. If the bad actor exported the information, kept it on their personal device or an external storage device, and they didn't do anything else with it, it could be possible to obtain a copy of that, destroy it, give it back to the victims themselves, and that ties a nice bow on it. Frequently, that's not what happened. So in this instance, for example, the credentials were bought on the dark web. I doubt that the terms of the sale included that the identified defendant here is the only person that had access to those credentials. My guess is that those were bought and sold a number of times. So those credentials are still out there. Now, fortunately, what that means is that the personal records themselves might not be out there. And it's just the credentials that were compromised. And other than the identified defendant and what he's accused of, the personal information itself, the social security numbers, the dates of birth, et cetera, those have been compromised. I would recommend that an information security consultant and attorney be retained to see what the extent of the damage is. Certainly all passwords should be changed, right? If these credentials were used to compromise those devices and those servers, they can be used for that purpose again. If the credentials aren't changed, the credentials should be changed. And if there isn't a system to regularly change passwords for all of those devices and servers, that system should be put in place. And that's basic security hygiene.
Right. So, John, obviously, the best time to contact you is before any type of breach happens.
Yes.
But also, you can add a layer of prevention after the breach too, right? And there's different steps that you would take after a breach.
Yes, absolutely. And a lot of the steps that we take after the breach are also steps that we would take before the breach, because just because a breach has happened, that doesn't mean that your exposure is diminished, right? It's not like once breached and it's not like a vaccine, right? You get it once and then you're fine for future attacks. If you've been attacked once and exposed once, chances are you could be attacked and exposed again. So you want to implement, if you have not already implemented good cybersecurity and information security practices, after an attack is a great time to do it. There's no time like the present. So it's things like retaining an information security technology provider, managed service provider, so that they can install firewalls, logging technologies, multi-factor authentication. Those are basic things that should be implemented. That's kind of your first line of defense. Then internally, what should be imposed upon the organization are controls to limit who can download executable files, where information goes, how frequently information is purged. So one of the problems that could have occurred here is that the medical records that were stored longer than they really needed to be. If you as an organization are holding information, personal information that are for customers that no longer exist with you, for projects that are years old, all you're doing is holding on to liability. And having a retention policy that automatically deletes that data every 6 months, every 9 months, whatever, that seriously minimizes or limits anyway what your ongoing exposure is to in the event of a breach like this.
Well, like always, John, great tips. Hopefully there'll be no more breaches in the future, but then when they are, I hope you can come back and comment on them again.
From your lips to God's ears, but unfortunately, I think that's not going to be the case. Thanks so much for having me, Jason. I appreciate it.
Take care.